I can still hear the click of the lock, sharp and final, like the snap of a trap closing. It echoes in my ears even though the room itself is unnervingly quiet. I'm in my boss's office. The air smells like stale coffee cologne that's too heavy, and something else I can't name, but feel deep in my gut fear. My hands are trembling, palms clammy, pressed uselessly against the edge of the desk behind me. I can't move. My mouth is dry. My mind is a blur of static. Andrew Blake is standing too close. I can feel the heat of his body, the shadow he casts over me, even though the fluorescent lights above hum with their fake brightness. His voice is low, quiet, deliberate, the kind of tone people use when they want their words to sink like poison into your skin. "No one's going to believe you," he says, his lips curling into a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "You know that, right?" My brain stumbles over the words. No one's going to believe you. They ricochet in my head, each syllable heavier than the last. My breath catches in my throat. Thoughts race, disjointed. Is this really happening? Am I overreacting? Should I scream? But would anyone even come? I picture the open office just beyond this door. Rows of desks, phones ringing, keyboards, tapping. My coworkers still here, wrapping up their day. I eat lunch with them. We share jokes in the break room. And yet now they're silent. I know they can hear the murmur of voices behind this door. They know something isn't right. And still there's nothing. The weight of betrayal crashes over me. I'm not just trapped with him. I'm trapped by the silence of everyone else. Andrew steps closer. My instinct is to move back, but there's nowhere left to go. My back hits the desk. My knees buckle slightly, grazing the cheap carpet, and I feel the burn of its rough fibers against my skin. My heart pounds like a drum in my chest, so loud, I can barely hear the muffled sounds of the office outside, the distant ring of a phone, the faint shuffle of someone walking past. The ordinary hum of work life continues like nothing is wrong, like my entire body isn't screaming inside. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he says. His tone is calm, almost reasonable, but there's a razor hidden beneath it. His hand hovers in the air close enough that I can feel the threat without it even touching me. I try to speak, but my voice cracks before the words even form. I can't find language. I can't find breath. My mind flashes with jagged images. My first day here. How proud I'd been to land this job. How my mom cried when I told her how I believed hard work would protect me. I see his smile in meetings, the way everyone laughed at his jokes, the polished man who was so good at pretending. My legs tremble. I stumble sideways, hitting the arm of the leather chair near the window. My fingers grip the edge, knuckles white. He's still watching me, tilting his head slightly like he's amused by my fear. My lungs feel tight, the air in the room heavy, like it's pressing down on me. And then, footsteps. They're faint, but I hear them. A slow, steady rhythm moving down the hallway. My heart stutters. Andrew glances toward the door, his jaw tightening. There's a pause. Then 3 soft knocks. A voice. Calm. Gentle but steady, cutting through the suffocating air. "Miss, are you okay in there?" I freeze. For the first time since the lock clicked, there's a flicker of something in me that isn't pure fear. It's small, fragile, but it's hope. My name is Hannah Cole. I'm 29 years old, born and raised in a small town in Ohio, where the air smelled like rain-soaked soil, and Sunday mornings always started with the sound of church bells. I moved to Chicago with big dreams and a borrowed suitcase, believing that the city held the key to the kind of life I had only seen in magazines and movies. I was the first in my family to graduate college, a daughter of working-class parents who spent their lives punching time cards and patching up the cracks in our old farmhouse. My father taught me to work hard without complaint. My mother taught me to keep my head down, to endure. They meant well. They believed those lessons would protect me. When I landed a job at a mid-sized marketing firm in the Loop, I thought I was finally stepping into my future. It wasn't the biggest company in the city, but it was polished and ambitious, the kind of place that made you feel like success was inevitable if you just gave enough of yourself to it. I believed in hard work and merit, in the idea that if I climbed the ladder one rung at a time, I'd eventually find my place at the top. I was idealistic, naive maybe, but I was proud. The office itself was sleek and modern with glass walls and exposed brick, the kind of place that looked more like a lifestyle ad than a workplace. I worked long hours sometimes, staying until the last train perfecting campaigns that would make other people rich, while I scraped together rent for a small studio apartment. But I didn't mind. This was what I had signed up for. This was how you made it. And then there was Andrew Blake. Andrew was everything you'd expect from someone in his position, charismatic, polished, effortlessly charming. He was in his mid-40s, always impeccably dressed, with a wedding ring that gleamed under the conference room lights, and a smile that could disarm even the most guarded client. On social media, he was the perfect family man. Pictures of his kids' soccer games, anniversary dinners with his wife, motivational posts about leadership. At work, he was the golden boy of the company's upper management, the one everyone wanted to impress. When he first took an interest in me, I felt flattered. He called me into his office one afternoon after a presentation and said, "You've got potential, Hannah. Real potential. I see something in you." It felt like a door opening. I was eager. I wanted to prove myself worthy of his attention, but then the small red flags started to appear. At first, it was the lingering touch on my shoulder when he leaned over to review a document. Too brief to make a scene about, too intentional to ignore. Then came the comments said with a laugh that made them feel like jokes. "That dress is dangerous, Hannah. Clients might forget what I'm saying." Or, "You're too pretty to be stuck behind a desk all day." After-hours texts began to creep in, framed as checking in on projects, but slowly shifting toward the personal. "How are you holding up tonight? Wish I could take you out for a drink to thank you for all this hard work." I told myself it was harmless. It was just how some men operated in corporate life. I convinced myself it was easier to laugh it off, to let it slide, than to risk being labeled difficult. Everyone at the firm gossiped about things like this, but no one ever confronted it. Not really. The company culture was competitive, image-driven, quietly toxic. Everyone protected their paycheck. Everyone learned which truths to ignore. I'd hear my coworkers whisper about the way Andrew liked to mentor young hires, but when I caught their eyes in the hallway after one of his comments to me, they looked away. It was easier for everyone to pretend it wasn't happening. So I rationalized. Maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. He's a good boss, isn't he? Maybe I should be flattered he notices me. But the truth was, I was already starting to feel isolated. I was far from home with no close family in the city and only a handful of acquaintances I might call friends. My world had shrunk to this job and this apartment. My stability depended on that paycheck, my lease, my student loan payments. The life I was trying to build, it was all tied to staying in Andrew's good graces. And deep down, I knew that in a place like this, speaking up would mean being replaced. I didn't know then how far it would go. I didn't know that the subtle, easy-to-dismiss warnings would escalate into something undeniable. I just kept working harder, convincing myself that if I stayed focused, it would pass, that he would stay professional, that I could handle it. But I was wrong. It started so quietly, I almost didn't notice it. Andrew began calling me into his office more often at first, under the pretense of extra coaching or mentorship sessions. He'd smile, that practice smile of his, and say things like, "Let's go over this presentation together. I want to make sure you really understand the finer points. You're the future of this team, Hannah." And at first I believed it. Who wouldn't? A senior manager taking time out of his busy schedule to help me polish my skills. It felt like I was being chosen for something special. But then the door started closing, every time. Click. At first it was subtle, like it was for privacy. But soon, it became habitual, automatic. That little metallic sound of the latch sliding into place began to make my stomach turn. The questions shifted too. Less about campaigns and clients, more about me. "Are you seeing anyone? You're always so quiet at company happy hours, Hannah. Don't you want people to get to know the real you?" He'd say it with a tone that felt halfway between curiosity and something heavier. He asked about my family, my childhood, my love life. He made me feel like a specimen under a microscope. Outside those meetings, my work started to change in ways I couldn't quite fight. He'd take credit for my ideas during group presentations, but frame it like teamwork. Hannah and I brainstormed this together, he'd say to the executives, even though it had been entirely my concept. Sometimes he'd forget to forward my work to clients and then publicly suggest I was being sloppy. And during team meetings, his feedback came wrapped in casual cruelty. "This is good, but Hannah tends to overthink things," he'd say with that knowing chuckle that made everyone else laugh awkwardly. Or, "She's talented but still so green. I'm working on her." They were little cuts, but they added up. I started feeling smaller every day. Then there was the night that finally shattered my denial. It was late, long past the time most people had gone home. The office was quiet, the city lights glowing faintly through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I was gathering my things to leave when Andrew appeared at my cubicle. "You've been working hard," he said. His voice was softer than usual, almost gentle. "Come into my office for a minute. I want to talk about your future here." I hesitated, but followed. The door shut behind me with that familiar click. He leaned against his desk, arms folded, looking at me like he was evaluating something more than my job performance. "You're special, Hannah," he said. "You're not like the others. I can make sure you go far here, if you're loyal to me." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. My throat went dry. I knew what he meant even if he didn't say it outright. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, that faint scent of cedar, and something metallic underneath. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear myself think. I mumbled something about being tired, about needing to get home. He smiled in a way that wasn't really a smile and said, "Think about it." The next day I went to HR. My hands were shaking as I explained what had been happening, careful not to use words that sounded too emotional. The woman behind the desk nodded, smiled sympathetically, and said she'd look into it. But her eyes flickered toward the glass-walled conference room where Andrew was sitting with another manager, laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. A week passed. Nothing happened. That's when I learned HR didn't really protect employees, they protected the company. And Andrew was the company. I started noticing the way my coworkers reacted too. They saw things. I could feel their eyes on me when Andrew put his hand on my shoulder in the break room, lingering just a beat too long. I saw the nervous glances exchanged during meetings when his jokes at my expense went too far. But no one said anything. No one wanted to get involved. They had mortgages, kids, promotions to worry about. I felt myself sinking into a fog of dread. The mornings became unbearable. I'd wake up with a knot in my stomach, already exhausted before the day even started. I began sleeping in fragments, waking in the middle of the night, with my mind replaying every interaction, wondering if I was overreacting. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it felt. But then, the memory of his voice would echo back, "I can make sure you go far, if you're loyal to me." I stopped going out with the few friends I had in the city. I stopped calling my parents as often. I was afraid they'd hear it in my voice, that quiet erosion of self. I told myself to hang on a little longer, to keep my head down. Maybe it would stop. But deep down I knew it wouldn't. It was late on a Friday, the kind of quiet evening in the office, when the hum of the fluorescent lights feels louder than your own breathing. Most of the staff had already gone home, their laughter fading down the elevator shaft hours ago. I was one of the last stragglers, hunched over my desk, finishing the quarterly proposal Andrew insisted was urgent. I remember thinking it was almost peaceful until I heard his voice. "Hannah," he called out from his office, the door already cracked open. "Got a minute? I just want to go over a couple of final edits before you leave." I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. It was strange he'd never stayed this late. My gut nodded, whispering, "Don't go." But habit, fear, and that ingrained reflex to be agreeable pushed me to my feet. His office smelled faintly of cologne, sharper than usual, mingled with stale coffee. I stepped in, holding my notebook like a shield. He closed the door behind me with a soft but deliberate click. The sound lodged in my chest like a warning. Andrew leaned against his desk, arms crossed, eyes scanning me in a way that didn't feel professional. His smile was too casual, too personal. "You've been working so hard lately," he said, his tone dripping with something I couldn't quite name but had learned to dread. I forced a small smile, clutching my notebook tighter. Just doing my job. He took a slow step closer. You do more than your job. You stand out. And you know I have the power to make sure you keep standing out. Or not. A chill ran through me. My voice faltered. Andrew, He interrupted, his hand brushing the edge of my sleeve, lingering too long. No one's here, Hannah. Let's not make this complicated. I can make things very easy for you, if you're loyal to me. I stepped back, bumping into the side of a chair. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like the entire room could hear it. I think I should go. He moved closer, blocking the path to the door, his body filling the small office like a shadow. His face hardened. Don't be dramatic. You know how this works. No one's going to believe you. You're new. I've been here for 15 years. I'm respected. He let the word hang, condescending. You're replaceable. My throat went dry. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. All I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears, the deafening hum of the lights. I was frozen, somewhere between fear and disbelief. He reached for the door lock. I heard the distinct click echo through the room. Something primal in me screamed to move, to shout, but my body betrayed me, stuck in shock. My mind flashed with images, his smiling family photos on his desk, the Christmas party where everyone toasted to his leadership, the HR meetings that always felt performative. There was no escape. Then footsteps. They were faint, but they cut through the suffocating silence like a lifeline. Someone was still here. Keys jingled in the hallway. Andrew froze mid-step, his jaw tightening. I could hear a soft shuffle, the sound of someone pushing a cart down the corridor. A gentle knock. A calm, accented voice called softly from the other side of the door. You okay in there? I heard voices. Andrew muttered a curse under his breath. He unlocked the door, forcing a smile so tight it almost looked painful. The janitor stood there. Miguel? I'd seen him 100 times emptying trash bins, quietly mopping the halls. He was holding a trash bag in one hand, his brow furrowed as he glanced from Andrew to me. I must have looked pale as a ghost, trembling in the corner. Everything's fine, Andrew said quickly with a forced laugh. She's just overworked. I was sending her home. Miguel's eyes lingered on mine, noticing the fear, the way I didn't move. He nodded slowly, but there was doubt in his gaze. Andrew grabbed his coat and mumbled, Get some rest, Hannah, before brushing past Miguel and disappearing down the hallway. The silence left behind was deafening. Miguel stepped into the doorway, his voice quieter, now gentle. Miss, do you want me to call someone? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My body was still shaking. Tears I didn't realize I'd been holding back finally spilled. He didn't push. He just nodded toward the hallway, a quiet invitation to step out of that suffocating office. It's okay. You're safe now. And for the first time that night, I believed someone. Monday morning felt heavier than any Monday before it. The air in the office was thick, as if it knew what had happened, even if no one dared to name it. I walked through the lobby, gripping my coffee like a lifeline, trying to convince myself that I could be invisible. But I could feel it, the weight of eyes on me. The moment I stepped into my floor, the chatter dropped an octave. My coworkers sat in clusters, their voices hushed but pointed. Megan from accounting glanced up at me, then quickly looked away. A pair of interns whispered to each other near the copy machine, their heads leaning close. No one smiled at me. No one said good morning. I settled at my desk, trying to focus on the glowing screen, but the silence was deafening. Then, just as I opened an email, someone leaned over my partition. It was Kyle from my team, his face unreadable. He didn't greet me, just muttered quietly, You should just let it go. He's untouchable. And then he walked away. Those words stung more than I expected. Let it go. As if it were a spilled drink, a missed deadline. As if it wasn't my body, my dignity, my safety. As if Andrew was some untouchable god and I was a fool for even thinking I could hold him accountable. I sat there frozen for a long time, hands trembling under the desk. By noon, I couldn't take the whispers anymore. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe I was imagining the way people were avoiding me. So I gathered what courage I had left and marched into HR. The office smelled like artificial lavender, the same way it always did. But that day it felt suffocating. The HR manager, a polished woman named Diane, greeted me with her corporate smile. "Hi, Hannah. What can I help you with today?" I sat across from her, knees tight together, hands clasped so hard they hurt. I need to report something about Andrew Blake." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes changed, guarded, calculating. "Oh," she said. "What kind of issue are we talking about?" I explained. Not everything. I didn't have the strength to relive the entire night. But enough. How he locked the door. How he made comments that weren't appropriate. How I felt unsafe. My voice cracked halfway through, but I forced myself to finish. Diane nodded slowly, too slowly, and folded her manicured hands on the desk. "Hannah, are you sure you didn't misread his intentions?" The words hung in the air like a slap. "Misread," I repeated, my voice brittle. She tilted her head in that patronizing way people do when they think they're being gentle. "You're new here, and Andrew has a direct style. Sometimes people unfamiliar with the company culture can take things the wrong way." "I didn't take it the wrong way," I said sharply, heat rising to my face. "He locked the door." She cut me off with a sigh. "You know, Andrew has been with us for 15 years. He's been an exemplary employee. I'm not saying we don't take concerns seriously, of course, but I do want to make sure you're absolutely certain about what you're alleging. These things can be career-altering for everyone involved. Career-altering, not life-altering, not soul-crushing, career-altering. For him." The meeting ended with a hollow promise. "We'll look into it." But the look in Diane's eyes told me everything. I wasn't being heard. I was being managed. By Wednesday, Andrew's retaliation began. It was subtle at first. I was suddenly removed from the high-profile project I'd been leading for weeks. He CC'd my colleagues on emails, hinting that my work was falling behind. At lunch, I overheard someone say I was having a breakdown. By Friday, rumors had already circulated that I was unstable, dramatic, not a team player. It was like watching my professional reputation dissolve in real time. I started questioning myself, lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking, maybe I overreacted. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe Miguel just misread the situation too. But then I'd remember the sound of the lock clicking, the way Andrew's voice dropped lower, the way my body froze in fear. And I knew I hadn't imagined it. Still, the shame seeped in, quiet and corrosive. I avoided the break room skipped after-work drinks. I kept my head down, but it didn't help. My silence didn't protect me. It only made me smaller. Every day I sat at my desk wondering if I should just quit. But then, I needed this job, this paycheck, this visa. My whole life in Chicago depended on staying employed. And that was the cruelest part. Andrew knew it. HR knew it. My coworkers knew it. And they all stayed silent. The worst betrayal wasn't even Andrew, it was the people around him. The people who smiled at me in the elevator, who shared office snacks, who made small talk about the weather. People I thought were decent. They knew, and they chose silence. It was late on a Thursday evening, the kind of evening where the office felt like a hollow shell. Most of the overhead lights were off, leaving only the faint glow from the vending machines and the dim, sterile light in the break room. I sat at one of the tables, clutching a paper cup of water that had long gone warm. I wasn't even crying loudly, just those quiet, tired tears that slip out when you're too exhausted to hold them back anymore. My shoulders shook, my breath came in shallow gasps. I didn't hear him approach at first. "Hannah." The voice was soft, tentative. I looked up, startled. It was Miguel, the janitor. He stood in the doorway holding his cart, his face etched with concern. His uniform was a little rumpled, his hands still gloved from emptying trash cans. I tried to wipe my face quickly, but it was pointless. My eyes were red, my mascara smeared. I'm fine," I whispered, though it sounded like a lie even to my own ears. Miguel didn't move closer right away. He just stayed at the door for a moment as if giving me space. Then gently he rolled his cart to the side and pulled out the chair across from me. He sat down slowly, keeping his hands folded on the table. I heard what he said that night. He began quietly. I froze. My throat tightened. He continued, his eyes steady but kind. I was in the hallway cleaning. I heard voices through the door. I heard him tell you not to make it complicated. Then I heard the lock. A shiver ran through me. He really had heard. I saw you when you came out. He added, his voice almost a whisper now. You looked pale, like you couldn't breathe. I saw the way he smiled after. I swallowed hard. My mind flashed back to that night, the way I stumbled out of Andrew's office, my body still shaking. The way Andrew forced that fake smile and muttered some excuse about me being overworked. Miguel had been there. He'd been the only one who looked at me with concern instead of judgment. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice breaking. Miguel hesitated for a moment, then exhaled. Because my daughter, she went through something like this at her old job, a manager. Everyone stayed quiet. She almost quit everything. She thought nobody would ever believe her. But one person, just one, told the truth, and it saved her. He leaned in slightly, not threatening, just present. I don't want to see someone else go through what she did. I stared at him, overwhelmed. For weeks I'd felt invisible. For weeks every person around me had chosen silence. And here was this man, someone who barely knew me beyond polite greetings in the hallway, offering something no one else had to truly see me. I can tell the truth, he said softly. I saw enough, I heard enough, but only if you want me to. It's your choice. A lump formed in my throat. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope, tiny, fragile, but real. You'd risk your job, I asked. Miguel gave a small, sad smile. What's the point of keeping a job if you can't keep your soul? I lowered my gaze to my hands, trembling against the cheap paper cup. I thought about the endless meetings with HR that went nowhere, the whispers from coworkers telling me to let it go, the sleepless nights where I doubted my own memory. And then I thought about what it would mean to finally not be alone in this. I don't even know where to start, I whispered. Start by saying yes, he said gently. I looked up at him. His eyes were warm but resolute. Yes, I finally said. My voice was small, but it carried weight. Miguel nodded once. Okay, we'll do this carefully. We talked for the next hour, hushed and deliberate. He explained how he could write an official statement about what he witnessed, the sounds through the door, the way I stumbled out, the look on Andrew's face. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to crack the silence. Enough to make HR unable to ignore it. We decided he would file the statement directly with the company's compliance hotline and send a copy to me for my records. We also agreed to reach out to an external workplace advocate he knew from his daughter's case. As we spoke, I realized how much courage this man had. He had nothing to gain, everything to lose. Yet he chose to stand with me when no one else would. Before he left, he placed a folded piece of paper on the table. This is my daughter's number, he said. She can tell you what helped her. You don't have to do this alone. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling around it. When Miguel wheeled his cart out of the break room, I sat there in silence for a long time. But it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. This silence wasn't suffocating. It was the quiet before a storm. For the first time since that locked door, I felt like I had a way forward. Filing the complaint felt like signing my own name in fire. I sat in front of my laptop one quiet Sunday afternoon, the cursor blinking on the screen like a dare. My hands shook as I typed every detail: what happened that night, the weeks of subtle retaliation, the whispers, the fear. Then, I attached Miguel's statement. His words were simple, factual. He described the sound of the door, locking, the tone of Andrew's voice, the way I stumbled out, pale and shaking. He didn't embellish. He didn't need to. When I clicked submit, it felt like both a release and a reckoning. There was no undoing it now. By Monday morning, the chain reaction had begun. HR called me in first thing. But this time, their tone was different. Less dismissive, more cautious. There was a witness now, a real witness, who had no reason to lie. They couldn't just sweep this under the rug. "We've received serious allegations," one of the HR managers said, her voice tight. "We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation." I sat across from her in the sterile conference room, my spine straighter than it had been in weeks. "I'll cooperate fully," I said. My voice sounded stronger than I expected. Word spread fast. By lunch, the office was humming with an eerie quiet. People avoided eye contact, whispering in clusters by the coffee machine. I could feel their eyes on me, measuring, judging. Some looked away in guilt. Others just stared like I'd become radioactive. Andrew didn't take it quietly. That afternoon, I opened my email to find a single line from him. "You don't know what you've started." My stomach twisted, but I forwarded it to HR immediately. No more secrets. A day later, I spotted him outside my apartment building. I was walking home exhausted when I saw his car idling by the curb. He leaned against it casually, like he was just there by chance. "We need to talk," he said when he saw me, his tone calm but edged with menace. I stopped several feet away. My hands were trembling, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "There's nothing to talk about." He smirked, the same smug expression he wore in meetings when he'd belittled me. "You're ruining your own career. You think they'll believe a janitor over me?" I didn't answer. I just pulled out my phone, took a slow, deliberate picture of him leaning against the car, and texted it to the HR manager. His smirk faltered. That was the last time he showed up in person. The investigation deepened over the next 2 weeks. Corporate legal got involved. They interviewed Miguel. They combed through Andrew's emails. And slowly, like cracks spreading through glass, the truth began to surface. It turned out I wasn't the first. Buried in old files were complaints, anonymous, vague, never fully pursued. Women who'd left quietly, notes marked as resolved without action. One by one, those women were contacted, and one by one they came forward. There was a pattern clear as day. Andrew had been careful, but not careful enough. The day they suspended him, the office went silent. I was in the middle of drafting a presentation when 2 men from corporate security walked past my desk. Andrew followed between them, his face pale and tight, his jaw clenched. He didn't look at me. For a moment, I just sat there frozen. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life. The fallout was swift. An email went out later that afternoon, effective immediately. Andrew Blake is no longer with the company. Some coworkers approached me quietly in the days after. A woman from accounting touched my arm gently and whispered, "Thank you. I didn't have the courage to say anything before." Another man from IT simply nodded at me in the hallway, his expression heavy but grateful. But there were still others who avoided me entirely. Some out of fear, some out of loyalty to the image of Andrew they'd chosen to believe. I learned quickly that speaking the truth doesn't win you universal applause. It just clears the rot. Miguel and I stayed in touch through it all. He'd stop by the break room sometimes just to check in. "You're stronger than you think," he told me once, his voice quiet but steady. "This isn't just for you. It's for everyone who couldn't say it before." The investigation revealed more than any of us expected. Andrew's behavior had been an open secret in some circles. Now, it wasn't a secret anymore. He didn't just lose his job. He lost the safety net of silence he'd relied on for years. When corporate legal asked if I wanted to press further lawsuits damages, I paused. I thought about it long and hard. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted closure. In the end, I decided to join the formal case with the other women who came forward. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about making sure he couldn't do this to anyone else. The day I signed the final papers, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for the months I lost doubting myself, for the version of me that had once believed in quiet endurance. Relief that I wasn't silent anymore. Andrew Blake would never work in that industry again. And even if the world didn't cheer for me, even if some still whispered behind closed doors, I knew the truth had finally been spoken. And sometimes that's enough. I didn't stay at the company. Even though technically I won, even though Andrew was gone and the whispers had finally started to fade. I couldn't breathe in that office anymore. Every corner of it felt stained with the memories of slammed doors, muffled conversations, and the suffocating silence of people who chose comfort over courage. So I walked away. I remember clearing out my desk on a quiet Thursday afternoon. My things fit into one small box: some pens, a coffee mug with a chipped rim, and a notebook filled with ideas I never got to share. As I carried it down the elevator, I felt a strange mix of sadness and freedom. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving with myself. The weeks after I resigned were disorienting. For years, my life had been built around deadlines, morning commutes, and a constant need to prove I belonged. Without that structure, I felt unmoored, but I also felt lighter. For the first time in years, I woke up without dread pressing against my chest. I started therapy. At first, it was awkward, like learning how to speak a language I hadn't practiced in decades. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Patel, helped me untangle the knots I didn't even know I was carrying. Years of quiet gaslighting. The small humiliations I brushed off as normal, the way I'd learned to doubt my instincts, because the people around me always minimized my pain. In one session, she asked me to write a letter to myself, the version of me who had been locked in that office, trembling on cheap carpet, believing no one would come. I wrote through tears. You weren't wrong. You weren't overreacting. You deserved to be safe. You deserved to be heard. Journaling became my lifeline. Each night I'd sit by my window with a cup of tea and let my pen move across the page. At first it was messy frustration, grief, shame, all tangled together. But slowly the words began to change. I wrote about the small moments of gratitude I hadn't noticed before, the way the light hit the kitchen counter in the morning, the feeling of fresh air on my face during long walks, the sound of my laughter when it finally came back. Miguel stayed in my life too. We'd meet for coffee sometimes after his shift. One weekend he invited me to his home for dinner. I met his wife Lucia and their 2 kids, bright-eyed and giggling, in the living room. His daughter Sophia was around 12. She shyly handed me a drawing she'd made of a butterfly. "This is for you," she said. "Papa told me you're brave." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I didn't feel brave most days, but in her eyes, maybe I was. It hit me then how one quiet act of kindness, one person daring to ask, "Are you okay?" could ripple outward into something so much bigger. Miguel hadn't just witnessed something, he'd stepped into the silence and broken it. And because of that, everything changed. Months passed, and slowly I began rebuilding a life that felt like mine. I took on freelance work, choosing projects that aligned with my values. I reconnected with old college friends who reminded me of who I was before the city hardened me. And one day, when a community center reached out asking if I'd speak about workplace harassment at their women's support group, I said yes. The first time I stood in front of that small group of women, 10 of them seated in a circle with kind but wary eyes, my voice shook. My hands trembled as I told my story, from the first red flags to the moment Miguel knocked on that door. But they listened. Listened. When I finished, there was silence. Then one woman raised her hand, her voice soft but steady. "I thought I was the only one," she said. After that, I kept speaking. Small events at libraries, community halls, and local panels. Each time the fear in my voice faded a little more. Each time I saw someone in the crowd, someone with that same look I used to have, and I knew the story was worth telling. I didn't set out to be an advocate. I didn't set out to be anything. I just wanted to survive. But survival has a way of becoming something more. Somewhere along the way, I stopped introducing myself as the woman who was locked in her boss's office. I started introducing myself as the woman who walked out and kept walking toward something better. The past didn't disappear. It's still part of me, but it doesn't define me anymore. When I sit by my window now, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I think about the girl I was when I first arrived here, wide-eyed, hopeful, believing that hard work and silence would protect me. And I think about the woman I've become. She knows better. She knows her voice is her greatest strength. I used to think the worst pain was that moment in Andrew's office, the click of the lock, the stale air, the way his shadow loomed over mine. I thought nothing could feel heavier than that helplessness. But I was wrong. The deeper pain came after, in the days and weeks when I walked into an office full of people who had seen enough to know something was wrong and still chose to say nothing. Their silence burned deeper than Andrew's words ever could. Because silence is a choice to look away, a choice to protect the wrong person. It took me a long time to understand that what happened wasn't just about one man's actions. It was about a culture that allowed it. A culture that whispered, "Don't ruin your career. Don't make a scene, just survive quietly." And for years I believed it. I believed being small was safer. I believed swallowing my discomfort was easier than speaking out. But I don't believe that anymore. When I think about everything that's happened, I think about Miguel's knock on the door. Just one person, one voice, one act of courage, and how that changed everything. It reminds me that change doesn't always come from the loudest person in the room. Sometimes it starts with the quietest one who refuses to stay silent anymore. I've spent months rebuilding my life, not just the outside parts like a new job or a new apartment, but the inside parts. The parts that were chipped away every time I doubted my instincts, every time I let someone else's power make me feel powerless. And now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone different. Not someone who is broken, but someone who is becoming. If you're listening to this, if you've ever been made to feel small or helpless, if you've ever been told it's better to stay quiet, please hear me now. Silence protects no one but the person who hurt you. Your truth is valid. Your story matters. You matter. I know it's terrifying. I know the fear of losing everything can feel like drowning. But here's the truth. I didn't know back then when you speak up, you're not just saving yourself. You're shining a light for someone else who thinks they're alone. And you are not alone. Now every morning before I go into my new workplace, a small nonprofit that supports survivors of workplace abuse, I walk past a young tree planted just outside the building. It's small, fragile even, but its roots are deep. Last week I brought my own little sapling and planted it right next to that one. As I pressed my hands into the soil, I thought about what it means to grow something new in the place where you choose to start over. That tree is more than just a plant. It's a reminder that even after the harshest winters, even after someone tries to cut you down, you can still bloom again. You can still grow strong. I left a small note tied to its branch. It says, "For anyone who thinks they can't, you can. And maybe one day someone else will see it. Someone who needs to know that survival isn't the end of the story. Healing is. And beyond healing, there's hope.